Hey YouTube, it's Justin, aka Demonic Sweaters. Now what you were just hearing right there, as you saw on the screen, were some of my real acoustic cymbals that I sampled yesterday, and I was using them in conjunction with my Roland TD6 drum module using this little device right here. This is a SmartWav plus MIDI adapter by the company Visic Technologies. I'll post a link to these down below. And this is a really cool little device. What this allows you to do is essentially it's a sample player with MIDI control. And you can basically run a MIDI output from your drum module directly into the MIDI input here and sample your own samples through this. And it has two audio outputs right there, left and right. And it also has a 1/8 inch output right there. So if you like, you can even run a 1/8 inch plug from this into the aux in your drum module. And then it's almost like, you know, everything's coming out of the drum module. But when I recorded it, I ran out of the stereo line output. So I could have basically the drums on 1 and 2 and then the cymbals on 3 and 4. But you could do it either way. So what I did yesterday is I actually sampled every single one of my actual cymbals, my acoustic cymbals. One at a time. I did all my rides, all my hi-hats, all my crash cymbals, and all my effect cymbals. And I put them all on the computer, and I was able to create that one basically collection of cymbals that you heard there in the beginning of the video. But I still have a lot more to do. So what I'm going to do is show you guys the process of how I was able to do that and just talk a little bit about this device in itself. Now, this thing is really cool for what it is. It's pretty inexpensive, and it's a great way to use hardware to play your own samples if your drum module can't do that. And if you don't want to use like a VST in a laptop or something like that, I actually prefer using this over Superior Drummer or Easy Drummer, even though those programs are far more powerful and they do a lot more than this thing and a little more user-friendly. But once you get this configured and set up, it feels kind of like you're just using hardware, because what you could do is actually create different folders within the SD card on this, and then when you press the up and down patch select on your drum module, it will automatically select through the different folders that you created in this device, which is really, really nice. So for example, what I did there is that program you heard in the beginning, I have that basically selected on my drum module where all the cymbals on that particular patch are muted because they're all coming out of here. But if I scroll down to the next one down, all of the internal cymbals come back on and then you hear nothing out of this. So it's really convenient, and you could essentially, configure this if you spent the time with it to basically really augment your drum module if it is limited and doesn't allow sample or import and things like that. Now this device is a little bit limited, and I've talked about that in the past. The polyphony is kind of low, so if you're trying to sample an entire drum set, sometimes it can cut out. Basically, if you're playing too many drums at the same time, or too many things are ringing out as you're playing. So it's better to use selectively, like either just replace 1 or 2 drums or the cymbals like I did in this case. Maybe you'd want to just replace your snare drum or, various things on the drum set. Then it works really, really well. It's a little bit of work to get it configured right and to get the files and everything put in there the way they should be and the naming and all of that. But I'm going to go over all of that in this video. So anyway, stay tuned. Before we do though, be sure to check out my record label, which is anthillrecordings.bandcamp.com. You can also stream Demonic Sweaters on all of the streaming services such as Spotify, Apple Music, and Deezer, and all the other ones that are out there. Amazon, I think that one's pretty popular these days. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started with talking about how to set up the SmartWav 2. Alrighty, so what you're looking at on the screen right here is basically the first set of samples that I did here that you just heard in the beginning of the video. Now, as you can see, they all just have numbers. Now, the reason why this is the way that this thing works is you name each file based on which MIDI note is used to trigger it. Now, that can be figured out basically by looking at your drum module or using some type of MIDI monitoring software. Most drum modules will tell you which MIDI note is sending out when you hit each drum, and I was able to do that on the TD6, though most of them are listed right here in the SmartWav Plus 2 adapter manual. So you can see right here we have kick drum is 36, snare 38, etc., etc. Then cymbals on the other side here, we have 51 for the ride, crash is 49, etc. So this is all, actually this part of the manual is based on the TD25, as you can see right here, but most roll-in modules are going to be the same. So if you're using a roll-in module, you could pretty much go off of this part of the manual. The only thing is, for example, my cymbals all have edge zones and bow zones. So they only show you here in the manual, they only show you the bow zone. So to get the edge zone, what I did is I went on the drum module itself and then went into the MIDI settings, then hit each cymbal, and then I was able to see which note was sending out when I hit that part of the cymbal. Now, the other thing that I should mention is the hi-hats. You might have noticed that I was using a VH11 hi-hat controller. This seems to be very difficult to get a splash sound out of. Even though it does work, but it's very hard to do with the SmartWav 2. I wasn't even able to get it to do it during the video. And then another thing that you might have noticed is when we look at the hi-hats for the SmartWav 2, there is no edge zone for the hi-hats. So what you have to do to make this work is basically you send the edge zone to the same MIDI note as the bow zone. So on your module, so in the drum module, you're going to have to change the edge zone of your hi-hat to send out hi-hat number 46 or whatever it is. I think actually it's 42 is the hi-hat bow zone is 42. So you would have to basically change that, and then you don't have to worry about sampling for the edge, which I actually made that mistake at the beginning. I sampled my edge zone of the hi-hats as well, and I thought I was going to be able to do both. but you really can't. So I'll get into more of that a little bit later. So the SmartWav 2 actually is multi-layered. So what that means is you can have 4 different samples for each drum or each zone, and you could do velocity levels. So if you look over here in the file, or in the folder rather, 21A, 21B, 21C, 21D, these are all of my velocity levels of the same drum or same cymbal. And basically what I did, I just sampled myself hitting it soft, then a little louder, then a little bit louder, and then finally the loudest. And then when I went in to name them, I export it, as A, B, C, and D. And the SmartWav is smart enough to figure out when you hit the drum, the corresponding drum, soft, it'll trigger the first sample. A little bit louder, it'll trigger the second sample, and so on and so forth. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense. I know it's a little bit nerdy, a little confusing, but I'm going to walk through creating one of these, sample libraries right here so you guys can see it. Right now, I just did this one. We have the Avanti set, even though there was, a couple other cymbals in there, but I mainly used, the Avanti crash, ride, and hi-hat. And then I added some other stuff in there because I only have those 3 Avanti cymbals. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder in here. And let's go to new, and I'm going to do Sabian set. So now I'm going to be using most or all of my Sabians and probably some additional stuff too. So let me go ahead and open up Audacity. This is what I'm using to do all of this stuff in. Now I'm going to open up my Sabian hi-hat samples. Now I actually had to redo these because the first time I did it, I forgot to sample the splash and the hi-hat pedal. So I went ahead and did them again. So that's why I have 2 Sabian files there. So you can see here, let me just play back a little bit of this. So the first part of it's just my pedal. And then I skip ahead. There's the splash sound. Now sometimes it's hard to get, especially with the splash sounds and stuff, quiet one first and medium quiet second. So sometimes you could tell which one's a little bit louder than the others. So I'd probably start with this one on the splash sound, but I'll just show you that here in a second. Let me go ahead and first I'm going to normalize this. So it's select all, we'll go to effect and amplify. And I guess I already did that. Another thing I should mention too is though the SmartWav 2 is stereo compatible, you have to do all of your panning and all of that in the samples themselves. There's no way you can adjust it like on the device. So as you can see here, this is my hi-hat. So I already have this selected at 30% left. I always pan things to the drummer's perspective. So that's how I'm going to keep this one. So let's go ahead and start off. I'm just going to zoom in here and select my first hi-hat pedal sound. So I think that's probably the quietest one right there. So let's zoom in. Zoom in a little more, make sure I don't have any extra there. You want to get them right at the beginning of the sample because if you don't, you could end up sounding out of, basically out of time if you try to play something and there's a little bit of silence before the sample starts. Okay, so that's good. So all I have to do is that. I'm just going to select it like that, and then I'm going to go to export and then export selected audio. Now I'm going to go to my new set folder here, and let's see, what is hi-hat pedal? Now, see, I made notes for myself right here. So just so I know what they all are, and then if I forget something, I can always look in the manual too. But hi-hat pedal is 44. So in order for this to work right, what you have to do is name it 044A. And press enter. Now it exported that as, basically the first layer of the hi-hat pedal sound. Now let's do the second layer. That one looks like pretty good. So, I mean, the hi-hat pedal doesn't really matter that much. You're not going to be able to tell that much of a difference. Okay, now let's export this one. Now I just named this one 44B. C, I would think, goes here, or it looks like this one. Now, I know this is extremely tedious, and that's just part of the fun. You just have to go in here and little by little create your own library. That's how it works. Okay, now we're almost done with this one. All right, now we're on to the splash sounds. This one looks like it's probably the quietest right here. Those Sabian Monarch hats sound really nice. Oops. You also want to make sure you select enough to where it just doesn't abruptly cut off. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so this one is 21 is the splash sound. So we're going to name this one 021A. Audacity doesn't let you export until it stops playing audio. Okay, one more. Do another one here. That one looks, well, it's a little quiet, but I like the sound of that one better. So I can actually make this one a little bit louder. Let's go to Effect and then Amplify. Not that much. Let's just do like, that's probably good. There we go. And that needs to be lengthened a little bit. Okay, just so it doesn't sound unnatural. And I actually did something very similar to this last year, and I forgot because when I had the idea to do this like a couple days ago, I started watching my old videos on the SmartWav, and I was like, I already did that, but this time I did it better, so I think it's fine. Okay, what's this? I think somebody made some noise. Yeah, there's a dog barking. Okay, here we go. All right, so now we're on to the closed hi-hat sound. Now you may hear a little stutter there. That's actually Audacity. I'm not sure why it just started doing that today, but it doesn't come out when you export the file. It's just some kind of weird glitch or something. My computer updated, so maybe I had something to do with it. Okay, so this one is 42, I believe. Let's just look at the manual again real quick. Yep, hi-hat closed is 42. Now, see, one of the big drawbacks of this thing is it does take quite a bit of time to set all of this up. You know, this is not like Easy Drummer or Superior Drummer that's loaded full of samples. You know, you're creating everything from scratch, basically using the SmartWav. But I prefer that. I figure if I'm going to spend the time to play custom samples, they're going to be my own samples. Why mess around with somebody else's samples, you know? Oh, I accidentally titled that one capital A. That's not going to work. Need to fix that. Let's fix that first. .42C. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to show you every single cymbal. I'm just going to go through the hi-hats here. And then we'll skip ahead to what this all sounds like once I finish the whole thing. Which will probably be tomorrow for me, because it's getting late already, and I'm not going to be able to play drums much longer, so today. Another thing too I would like to mention is you also need to get your levels set on, you know, the samples themselves. Now the way that I do this, it's actually not as hard as it may seem. You just have to normalize every file that you do, and don't normalize each individual sample. Excuse me, only normalize the full thing. So the loudest hit is still the loudest, you know, of all the samples you export. And all the other ones are, you know, they're quieter in relation to how hard you were hitting. So if you do everything like that and then you export, everything sounds pretty natural when you get it in the actual drum SmartWave and play. Then it sounds pretty natural that way. Okay, what is this? Okay, this is half open, so. That sounds a little too open. Maybe that's why I started again here. Okay, let's hear these. Yeah, that's a little better. Half open sounds. Half open is 23. It looks like my, well, maybe not. Okay, I was going to say it looks like my fourth one was quieter than the third one, but maybe not. What was that, 43 or 23? 23. All right, now we should be on to the open sounds. Yep. Having the multiple layered sounds is actually what makes it sound really good. You know, it sounds pretty realistic when you're playing. So open is 46. All right, one more. As you can see, it takes quite a bit of time to do one cymbal, but actually the hi-hats take the longest because they have the most variations. Crash cymbals and effect cymbals especially don't take very long. I didn't even bother doing bow zones for the effect cymbals because you don't really need them. Okay, that's all of that. Now, before I go and show you guys the results of the rest of the cymbals, I also want to mention a couple other things. One being the config file for the SmartWav. So that's mentioned here in the manual. I mean, first off, just read the manual because you're going to need it to really understand this thing. But if you can see right here, the config file tells you, or tells the SmartWav, a couple of important things. Basically, there's the layer level option, which you can see right there in the middle. If you don't have that word layer level in there, it only will use single samples. It won't use the multi-layered samples. Now, if you do have layer level in there, you have to make sure you have A, B, C, and D for each sample that is in the SmartWav. If you don't, things will be really weird. For example, yesterday I had a little bit of a mystery because what I'd done is only put in one sample for the hi-hat close because I was like, it's not going to need different layers for the, the pedal sound. And it was making it basically not behave correctly. When I would step on the hi-hat, it wouldn't cut off the open sound before I started playing the close sound. But once I put in the rest of the samples, then everything started to work fine. So make sure you have all the samples, A, B, C, and D, for each sample you are using in the SmartWav. Now, you don't have to have every single drum sample in there. It will only play what's in there, but if you have one that's in there without all the layers, it won't work right. So make sure you have all of the layers if you have layer level selected. If you don't have layer level selected and you're okay with just having single layered samples, then all you have to do is just drop one in there and name it the one MIDI note that you're going to use, which can be cool sometimes. If you're doing like more electronic sounds, it's usually fine for that kind of thing. Like I did like an 8-bit sounding kit too that I did on one of my old videos, and they were all single layered sounds and they all sound just fine that way. So that's totally doable as well. The note off disable thing is also, you need to have that in there. It'll be in there by default, but that basically tells the SmartWav to keep letting the drums sustain while you play other drums. If you have that out, like not in the config file, each drum will basically cut off after like a second of playing it. Hi-hat open note and close note, 46 and 44 is pretty standard, but if it doesn't work for you using those, then look inside of your manual for your drum module and you should be able to figure it out. So anyway, hopefully all of that made sense. I know like one of my older videos I posted, and one of the comments somebody left was like, I understood nothing. So hopefully this makes some kind of sense. This thing is basically just a little MIDI sample player is all it is, but it works really well with electronic drums, and you could use it even as a module, like if you really wanted to. If you really make the samples pretty low resolution and single layer, then you can use this as like every single sound, for an entire drum set if you wanted to. I've done that. There's a video of me doing that with my drum cat. So anyway, here's the final result. I'm going to flash forward to after I finish all of this, and maybe I'll be back for an outro of the video after that. So anyway, here we go. All right, that's going to be all for this one, everybody. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click the bell icon and all that good stuff down below. And also check out anthillrecordings.bandcamp.com. That's the best way to support me. I don't use Patreon or anything like that. So you can support me by picking up something there. And plus, I think you might like the music if you listen to enough of it. You can also stream me on all the streaming services like Spotify, Apple Music, and all that stuff. Just search Demonic Sweaters or my other projects such as Manasota and Hums. Anyway, I'll see you guys really soon and have a great weekend. Later.